Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stigma-Free Society's Facebook Live event. My name is Gerry Friesen, also known as a recovering farmer. I am a stress and conflict management specialist working out of Manitoba. Because of my own journey with mental illness, I have a real passion in talking about it because it is in talking to others we can find a path forward for ourselves. You can learn more about me by visiting gerryfriesen.ca. Through this Facebook Live event, I am representing the Stigma-Free Society, which is a Canadian registered charity that aims to reduce stigma of all kinds with a focus on mental health. This event is part of their Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit, an online community-based mental health program that creates access to mental health education and peer support training, as well as practical and relatable resources for those living in rural and agricultural communities. You can find the toolkit at ruralmentalwellness.com, and I'll give you that again later. I am excited today to have the opportunity to chat with Megz Reynolds. Hi, Megz.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's been a while, and of course, like you said before when we were chatting, that we've known about each other for a while, but this is the first time we're officially meeting, about as official as we can get these days, it seems.
It's true, yes.
All right, a quick bio on Megz before we jump in. Megz has firsthand experience in agriculture as a former grain farmer and is personally familiar with the unique challenges the industry faces. Through grassroots advocacy and policy work, Megz has been part of creating change at a provincial, federal, and global level, always with a focus on the mental health of producers and the industry as a whole. As the executive director of the Do More Agricultural Foundation, Megz is using her background and lived experience to continue the conversation, raise awareness for mental health in agriculture, create community, build and strengthen partnerships, and do more for those in agriculture, their families, and rural communities. So, Megz, why don't we start? Can you begin by telling us how you got started in the field of agriculture?
Well, growing up, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, but my grandpa and my uncle had a cattle ranch in southern Alberta. So I kind of had that weekend farming lifestyle, which was a little bit romanticized, I would say. And from that, always one day wanted to end up on a farm. I was working in the Canadian film industry when I met my ex-husband, and he was farming in Southwest Saskatchewan. So after we'd been together for a while, and I decided that, next step was moving out to the farm. He wasn't going to be the one to relocate. I retired from the film industry and moved to the farm at that time, really only knowing that at some point everything is going to break down, since my exposure had been to the ranching side. And I loved it. I dove in headfirst, learning to run the equipment, learning what we were doing, why we were doing it. I had some preconceived notions coming from the city and being a little unsure about what we were doing on the farm, or having some of those mistrust with the technology that was going on in agriculture, especially on the seed side. So learning all of that, and then also learning to work on the equipment. I started an apprenticeship as a heavy duty mechanic when I first moved to the farm, which I didn't finish as we started having kids. But that was, my exposure to grain farming was really diving headfirst into it and embracing all it had to offer.
I like that. You started farming knowing everything was going to break down at some point in time. And boy, I'll tell you, coming from my farming background, I know how true that certainly is.
That never let me down.
You've got that right. But I also find it interesting. It's quite a leap to jump from the film industry to farming and heavy duty mechanics.
It was, in some ways, there were transition pieces in film. I was working very long hours. When you're on a project, everything is about getting that project done, very much like seeding or harvest. I was doing special effects and set decks, so kind of had that hands-on doing some of the mechanical stuff. So it is interesting how such a very different career actually gave me a pretty good base to step into grain farming.
That's interesting. And I've talked to other people in the past that have had different careers and kind of jump into the agricultural sector, and they kind of say the same thing. There are certain aspects, I suppose, of any work that can provide some of the background you need to do the farming piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now you're the executive director of Do More Ag. And of course, Do More Ag has been around for a number of years, and we're going to get into more of what they do. But how does this firsthand experience you have with farming impact or direct the work you do now?
I think that it's been really important for me. And I think I underestimated how important having that lived experience was going to be coming into this role. But it's not just me preaching about mental health in agriculture, or saying these are the things that can affect farmers, or these are some of the challenges in agriculture. I can say that because I've lived it. I have felt that my only worth was in my life insurance policy, or that I was digging my grave to follow my dreams in the early years of my farming. And then I think that really lends itself as well when you're trying to communicate outside of the industry, whether that is to government or to media or other potential partners. But it's not just sharing someone else's story and connecting it to mental health and agriculture. It's sharing my story and why I'm passionate to be here with Do More Ag and doing what I'm doing with mental health and agriculture.
Yeah, and I like that passion piece, Megz. And I was asked just recently why I am as passionate as I am with the work I do on the mental health side of things. And I have to actually sit back and think a little bit about why I am passionate. And I think it's largely due to the fact that there is that lived experience, and because of that lived experience, it gives us a familiarity with what a lot of other people, or I guess perhaps most of our agricultural community, is experiencing.
Mm-hmm. And agriculture is, there are many ways that it is a unique industry. And I learned very quick, coming from outside the industry to farming, and then trying to reach outside the industry for support. My second year farming, we lost 90% of our crop at harvest to a hailstorm. And nothing in my life growing up had prepared me for that type of devastation or loss. It was out of my control, but I still felt like I'd failed as a farmer. I had already, after 2 years, attached my sense of self-worth and my identity to my ability to grow a crop. And I reached out to a friend outside of the industry for support. And I do not falter on this, because I probably would have had a similar response had I, prior to coming to farming. And she said, I totally get what you're going through. I lost my garden 1 year to hail. And so I think having that lived experience and being able to share and be vulnerable is so important, especially in an industry where there are unique challenges. And then we also have so much stigma attached to mental health and to showing vulnerability and what we perceive as weakness and talking about our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you made a really important point there that a lot of farmers deal with on a daily basis, is the fact that it seems that farming is becoming more and more stressful. There's so many more things that are in a farmer's control, but there's also so many things that are outside of a farmer's control, and the impact, just the way you shared about the hailstorm wiping out your crop. Those are things that are outside of our control, and yet the impact they have on our mental wellness is incredible.
Mm-hmm. And our economic viability as a business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you've jumped from the film industry into farming, into heavy duty mechanics. Now you're doing advocacy work as far as mental health goes. Why is that important for you?
I found, well, first I got into advocacy to start sharing the farm story. Again, coming back to that, coming to the industry with, misconceptions and some mistrust there. I really wanted to share what we were doing and why. This is a combine. This is how it works. Then you can, when you go by a field the next time, it's like, oh, I know what that is. I saw this video, and you have this connection. And when you have a connection, you can start building that trust. And I don't want anyone to go to the grocery store. I was a new mom at the time and be scared of the food that they were buying for their family. And then just with lived experience on farm, having all of those things out of your control, some of the isolation that comes with farming, the long hours, the, reduction in sleep during certain times of the year. I found that writing really helped me. And so I started blogging, and I started talking about and sharing what I was going through and what was affecting my mental health. And that helped me. And it wasn't so much about whether someone was reading it or not. I just needed to get it off my shoulders and put it out there. But in the process, what I found is that by doing that and by being vulnerable, I was creating a safe place for others to share or to come to me and say, I know what you're feeling. I've been there. I got through it. You've got this. And so that was kind of a big light bulb moment for me of sharing is important. And it's not just important for me and my mental well-being, but it's important for those that are coming across it and reading it, even if it's just to know that they're not alone in what they're going through. And so that was when I really started to lean into the mental health advocacy piece. And it's hard to be vulnerable and it's hard to share really personal things and then to relive it in the sharing. But I understood the importance of it. And then we finally got to the part after the University of Guelph's initial survey on mental health and agriculture, where suddenly the government was looking into it as well. And so in 2018, I testified to the Agri-Food Standing Committee on Mental Health and Agriculture. And just kind of from there kept, mental health can be brought into almost every conversation. We had issues with China and canola in 2019, and sure, that's a trade issue, and that's an issue that affects your balance, your bank account balance, but it's also a mental wellness issue. And how is that affecting producers and those in the industry? And so really trying to, with every conversation, bring it back to what does that do to mental health and mental well-being?
Yeah, exactly. So I know Dumarag has done a lot of work in reducing stigma. There's some really good resources out there. Do you see an indication out there that the stigma is reducing?
I truly believe that we, and when I say we, that is the collective, everyone in the space, everyone who's choosing to share, we have moved the needle when it comes to stigma. But I would say where we have really had the most change is that external stigma piece. So we're more comfortable talking about it. Now you go to a trade show and a conference and there's a presentation on mental health, or the donations from the auction are going to mental health, or something we wouldn't have seen 6-7 years ago. So we're talking about it. And that's a great place to start. It truly is one conversation at a time to change the culture. But what I'm noticing in my conversations is kind of that response of, I totally support mental health and agriculture, and I support somebody else going to talk to somebody and doing what they need to do, but I would never need to do that. And so I think it's that internal stigma piece that we're still really struggling with. And the internal piece for me is the hardest piece. That is what keeps someone who has a ton of support around them, be that their family or their community members, from being able to identify that there's something going on and be able to move past identifying that and into actually reaching out for help, be that a crisis line or booking counseling sessions or what have you.
Yeah. No, and I like that. And I often use the example. I started telling my story in 2010. And like you say, the needle hardly moved back then.
Yeah.
But certainly here, 12 years later, when I do presentations, I've actually gotten to the point where people do get up and publicly ask some fairly personal questions. And it's really good to see. And again, with the Farmer Wellness Program now in Manitoba, we still need to get people to take that first step and actually start looking for that help that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and thank you for starting when you did, sharing your story, because I can't imagine how challenging and daunting that would have been at that time, because that conversation wasn't really going on. I can't imagine there was many people outside of yourself that were trying to have it.
Well, you know what? I think I was somewhat naive. I didn't realize the impact it would have. And then when it started, I just, again, and I don't hesitate in saying this, when I started talking about it, not only did I realize now that I was helping other people, but the help it was for me to verbalize and to put out there all this stuff that happened to me when I was farming.
Mm-hmm.
And the absolute bonus there is in being able to talk about it, whether it's to the public or whether it's just to a friend, a family member, or a neighbor.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you do a lot of work with governments, both on a provincial level, but also on a federal level regarding the work you do at Do More. What kind of response are you seeing there?
I feel like that has changed as well. There is more appetite to understand. I mean, now we have a federal minister for mental health. We're seeing provinces have provincial ministers that are specific to mental health, which is incredible. So again, we're taking steps in that direction, and I'd say on the government side, it is or can be more of a challenging landscape because of the jurisdiction pieces. Even though, federally there are dollars coming out across Canada for mental health, it's still up to the province's mandate letter and what they choose to do with that. And so that's why you see more of a fractured approach to what support is there, especially for, I would say, mental health and agriculture or rural mental health. You've got provinces like Quebec or PEI that have pretty robust agricultural support programs with crisis lines, counseling. Ontario's just brought one in. You have some provinces that don't have anything. New Brunswick being one. They've just started the conversation, which is incredible, and I will give them all the credit for finally coming to that conversation and understanding it needs to be a priority. But one thing I have really noticed, especially from the Ministry of Agriculture federally, is looking to understand the mental health side. So when avian flu first hit the East Coast this spring, they reached out to do more and said, what is this doing? And I said, well, I can have a overreaching conversation, but I'm going to bring in Amy, who is a poultry farmer in Nova Scotia, because she's the one who should be having this conversation with you. And so I would say that they're really looking to understand how the different events that are going on and that affect agriculture are also affecting producers' mental well-being, which is incredible. That is how we evolve programs. And again, too, I think that the commodity groups and the different organizations that are having conversations at all the different levels with the business risk management programs are also starting to look at how does that tie into mental health. And so I think, again, we're starting down this path, and it's great to have these conversations. I think there's still a lot we need to do. It'd be incredible to have a national support line that is specific to agriculture. Even just something as, I have a friend who is trying to get a blurb at the end of the crop report that goes out, provincial crop report, that says, due to what is going on your operation, this report could be triggering. If it's okay to not read this. If you need to talk to someone, here's the crisis line specific to your province or territory, and was shut down on that. So there's still all these pieces that we have to work on, because we're really just realizing, I think, and getting to the point where we're understanding that these things can be triggers, and looking forward to say, okay, how do we best support those in the industry that are going to be reading or coming across something, or just the whole suite of how that interconnectivity goes.
Yeah. Now Dumore is working on a national crisis line, are they not?
We're working on a some type of national support. It very much started as a crisis line. The challenge with that we've run into is, again, that everything is provincial. And so there's also been a MP out of BC that's been working on a 3-digit crisis number, to the point where it's progressed, where it was now amending the Telecommunications Act, and there has been movement. So I've been in communication with them to make sure that, again, what we don't want to be duplicating efforts as well, especially with government. And so with this going forward, it's okay, how do we make sure that this can also support those in agriculture? And that could mean once it's up and going, that the clinicians that are on the other end of the phone line, that they're trained in agriculture literacy, so that when someone from the industry does call in, they're able to make that connection and to understand the industry and actually support that person.
Yes, that and again, that piece about when excuse me, people from the farming community do phone and do finally take that step to call a crisis line, and the person at the other end isn't familiar with the intricacies of agriculture and the impact different things have on mental health, people feel very defeated when they try that, and they go, well, see, I didn't think it would work, right?
Yeah. And I'd say with the stigma too, it's that much harder for that person to make that call. And if they are met with, my hailstorm story, if they're met with that comment that shows that person doesn't understand, they're going to shut down and they're going to not try again. And that's, I was there. I know that. I was like, I can't talk to anyone about this. They don't understand. we kind of get one shot. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that Do More did last year, was create an ag literacy workshop for those in the mental health space that we've been delivering this year. Again, with that, if we can get people to take that big step of faith and make that call or book that appointment, making sure that person on the other side of it is able to form a therapeutic relationship with them.
Now, we did talk a little bit about the national, stress line type concept, but there's also other work that Do More does. Can you, and you just mentioned, and I believe it's called ag culture is what you were referring to. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Ag culture, it's a 4-hour workshop, and we designed it specifically for mental health professionals, and it's agriculture literacy. So it's really to get into some of the unique challenges of agriculture, how you just can't say, well, if things are that hard, maybe you sell the farm. Well, understanding that that means that you're letting down that immediate family, you're letting down possibly 4 to 5 generations. That doesn't have the same effect on someone's mental well-being as, starting a business and then, 10 years later having to shut your doors. So really looking at those unique to agriculture pieces, living where you work, working with family, not being able to just take off for a week and when you're burnt out and have a holiday, the stigma that is in agriculture, all of those pieces. We've been delivering that to social workers, rural social workers, rural nurses and doctors, people that are working on crisis lines, clinicians that are working for some of the apps like LifeWorks or TELUS Health. I think that program itself would also be really great for even just like for me, before I came to farming. I think that would have been a really great introduction. And I had that conversation at a trade show the other day where it was someone that had married into the farm and she was like, I would have loved this. Yeah. That would have really helped me just have a better understanding to kind of skip through those first really challenging years of trying to understand it. And I could identify with that, when it's go time and you have to go. My first harvest, I shut the combine down and went and had lunch with a friend. And I definitely, that did not go over well. And I didn't understand what I had done wrong, right? So it's all of those nuances and those pieces. And then trying to understand too, the trust side, or feeling like people don't understand what we're doing, or that, now too, there's more coming in, especially on the animal side, where there's activism and farm families are actually scared because of some of that activism going on. We've got regulations going on that are dictating the tools that we get to use to be successful. Oftentimes they are detrimental to what they're trying to achieve just because there isn't maybe enough boots on the ground connection when designing them. So all of those pieces, that is our ag culture course. And then we also have a Talk, Ask, Listen, which is a mental health literacy workshop, same thing, 4 hours. And that's been geared towards people in agriculture. So we've been doing that with rural communities, producers, but also industry, understanding that, it's when producers are struggling, industry is also struggling. But also knowing that there are often times when, the lender or the agronomist or the input provider or the veterinarian, they show up to the farm or they're having a conversation with that farmer and they're not necessarily prepared to be a support person, but that farmer just needs to, it's not their family member, it's not their community member, get a lot off their chest. And that can be a really hard position to be in. And in some cases, a dangerous position for both people to be in if there hasn't been any training on mental health or how to have that conversation. And, I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in the city, but we didn't grow up talking about mental health or learning about how to have that conversation or how to support ourselves or somebody else. And then the one of the third things we've just recently done, which we're excited about, is we've created a QR code sticker to go inside equipment cabs, on toolboxes and shops, on notebooks, wherever. When you scan that QR code, it uses your location and it connects you automatically to the crisis line that is relevant for your province or territory. If you're not looking to make that call at that moment, you can opt out to a resource page, but it can be really hard to, in that moment, when you're not processing things clearly, try to find a number and try to reach out for help.
Oh, that's an awesome idea. I hadn't heard about that one. I like
it's really new.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely perfect. Um, I was just going to say, when you were talking about when veterinarians or feed salesmen or seed sales people show up at the farm, how often they're exposed to that kind of, the farmer venting, feeling safe to do that. And now, since I've been involved in this kind of work over the last few years, I often think back to when I was farming and I was going through my crisis, and the feed salesman would show up, and they would get the brunt of it, right?
Yeah.
And it could either be that I was angry and would lash out at them,
Right.
or I would see them as being someone safe I could talk to. Just like you said, they're not family, so I'm not bringing my family into this. And so that happens way more often than we think. And I'm reminded of a person I met a few years ago in Saskatchewan who had a territory, and I can't remember the numbers anymore, but a high percentage of her clients were all experiencing, I believe it was a drought at the time. And she said, I feel helpless. I have to go see my clients, but I don't know how I can deal with them because I don't have that expertise that's now being offered in at least a small way. And I think that's a really, really good point. And I think it needs to be taken note of.
And then we run a community fund every year with FCC. So we bring courses to rural communities across Canada. And one of them would be mental health first aid for those that kind of have already done that introduction, but are learning to be more of that support person when it's needed.
So what kind of challenge would you throw out there, Megz, to there's those that are really dealing with overwhelming stress and are having a difficult time processing that, and yet there's others that seem to be able to go through a day and the stress doesn't bother them. What would you say to those people?
I would say that in agriculture, one of the things that I've learned, and there's something called a mental health continuum, and it's almost like the traffic lights, and it shows you green, yellow, orange, red, and it's symptoms that show where your mental health and wellness is at. I would say that for those that are really going through their day-to-day and feeling like they're not being affected, I would love to just take a moment and look up the continuum and look at what your symptoms are or your reactions to things. Because I think in agriculture, we've really normalized living with chronic stress. And so there's a lot of these characteristics that are warning signs to possibly incoming mental illness because of not dealing with things that we've normalized as characteristics. Oh, that person's always quick to react. They're usually distracted. They never can remember, where they put a tool down. Don't talk to them right now. It's not the season. They're going to be grumpy. Those are all symptoms that something is going on. That's not actually their personality. Something is going on. And so that would be my challenge, is that I think we can always use support for our mental wellness, whether that's even just journaling or meditation or picking up the phone and talking to someone. And that's when we're at the green. And so I think checking out that mental health continuum and honestly looking at where do you fall, and I will catch myself doing it. I've got 2 girls. Sometimes they're challenging. And if I react a certain way, I'll hit pause and say, what's going on? Because I don't think I'm reacting to what just happened because of them. There's something else that's going on that I need to deal with. And so I think it's important with farming. There's so much going on, but to recognize that how we react or those symptoms that we have are our underlying causes that are trying to tell us that there's something we need to look at and deal with.
Yeah. And very often people are hesitant to go talk to someone that they know are struggling because they don't feel they have the answers. And again, it boils down to a lot about this workshop DoMore provides, the talk, ask, listen, where if someone is struggling, it's not rocket science to be able to go to them and be able to listen to them, which again, I know from personal experience really helped me when a neighbor provided that for me. And so I think that's a really important piece again too.
Mm-hmm. And there's a buddy up program being run through the Suicide Prevention Center, and it's literally that. Most people are going to struggle to reach out for help. So it's a lot easier for us to reach out and say, how are you actually doing? Like, I know that this is going on. How are you actually doing? And creating that space. We don't need to have the answers. We just need to ask the question and be there to listen for them.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. So Megz, we've come to the end of our 30 minutes. You've provided just a brief, it always goes by far too quickly. Just, can you let our audience know where they can find more information on DoMore Ag?
Our website is www.domore.ag. We have a resource page which lists by province all of the different resources. You can learn more about our programs, and you can also donate through our page as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Megz, for joining us today. Your insights into mental health and wellness certainly have resonated with me, as I'm sure they have with our audience. And again, the challenge I know Megz threw out there, and I'll throw the same thing out, is when people are feeling that stress, when people are feeling that they're off, when things just aren't right, they shouldn't hesitate to step out and talk about it. Again, I did, and it certainly helped me. And so just want to throw that out and leave that there with our audience. And again, thank you, Megz. You can find more information at www.domore.ag. And also, if you've watched this Facebook Live event and you would like to share it with others, you can find that at the Stigma-Free Society on their website at ruralmentalwellness.com. So till next time, stay safe and stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye.